I cannot think of anything more dangerous to the well-being of your life and to the success and well-being of our society than everybody having their own truth. Welcome to the Good Life Podcast, where we talk about the search for significance, the pursuit of purpose, and the challenges of our culture. I'm Carl Nichols, and I'm here again with Daniel Foster, and we are again honored that you would join us. Daniel, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. I'm doing really, really well. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Life is different. At the time of this recording, my wife is out of town, and I'm with my two boys. We homeschool our kids. So
you're playing mom and dad right now.
I say we homeschool our kids. I'm just glad they're homeschooled. I don't do much with them. In fact, when Julie decided she was going on a missions trip, and she got ready to go, my youngest, who's 11, who just loves his mom, loves the family being together, hates mom being gone. He had tears in his eyes, and he said, I just don't want to do school with dad. And so,
poor kid.
So I'm doing well other than that right now.
You're learning that homeschool is a lot more difficult than you thought.
I think one kid was pretty easy, but when you got two different kids that are so different, they're about 4 years apart, and they learn differently. It's challenging, but my wife, man, she's a champ. Julie kills this, and I'm telling you, if I can just say anything, look, love homeschoolers, hate homeschoolers. Some homeschoolers are weird. Maybe people say mine are weird. I hope they're not. But it's one of the greatest decisions we ever made.
Really?
But sometimes when mom's gone, I'm like, oh, gosh.
Come back.
Yeah. So
that sounds like it should be a great topic for a future podcast.
Yeah, man, we can talk about all things family. And I'll say this. One of the greatest things that contributed to the good life for us was making the decision to homeschool our kids because of our schedules and taking time back. We can talk about all that stuff
I'd love to unpack that one day. But today we're going to talk about 3 disturbing truths about my truth. And I want you to go ahead and kick it off. Give us some of your thoughts.
My truth.
What does my truth mean to you?
Yeah, you talk about this a lot with our students. But my truth is really, I think, more of a Western culture thing than anything else. Obviously, you see this across the world now, but in our culture specifically, this idea of truth is become relative to whatever I'm going through or whatever I feel or whatever I decide. And so truth changes. But this is nothing new. Even in my generation, not yours necessarily, but my generation, in the 90s, there was a book that came out, Right from Wrong, and really predicted this day, or kind of foretold where we're headed. And now we're in this conversation about my truth. And when we think about my truth, I want to say this as we kick it off. I cannot think of anything more dangerous to the well-being of your life and to the success and well-being of our society than everybody having their own truth. When I say that, people flippantly toss this word, what's my truth? Or truth is relative, or there's no absolute truth. This is not a slippery slope. This is jumping off a cliff. This is dangerous. Right. I can't think of anything that would undermine the moral and intellectual and integrity of a culture, of a home,
it's
of a person's
scary
life.
To think that at any moment anyone can define what they want as truth.
Absolutely. And I think the hardest part about this is they do it with pride.
Yeah.
I take pride in my truth. Well, your truth's wrong most of the time. There's only one
truth.
They
proclaim it so boldly.
And listen, we know that at the core of what we believe here in my life as a pastor, as a father, as a husband, as a Christ follower, at the core of everything we believe is that God is the founder of truth. Jesus modeled truth. He said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. But even if you throw all that away, which we don't because we believe in the power of God to save and who Jesus is and all those things. But the reality is, even if you throw that away, just the intrinsic danger of you deciding what's right for you. And I mean, how far do we take this?
Where do you draw the line? Because what if my truth is at your expense?
Correct. And what if we have conflicting truths? Well, it's an impossible way to live.
Right.
But that's where we're at. And so I love this podcast. Really, every time we do this, we're going to focus on 3 things. 3 basic things. 1, 2, 3, roll, get out of here, 12 to 15 minutes usually. And so you can go on about your day and your week and just process. But today is packed with 3 things that I think are going to challenge us. And so as we talk about these ideas, 3 disturbing truths about my truth, here's what I believe. This in his book, Reinventing Liberal Christianity, Theo Hobson gives us these three things, and I just want to unpack them because I don't necessarily think I'm the greatest creator of content, but I think curating content is really
curator.
I love curating other people's content. But he says this: the number one that we'll kind of unpack is the danger or the truth about my truth. Disturbing is this: what was once universally condemned is now celebrated.
Wow. Say that again.
So what was universally condemned, people in the vast majority of society would say, man, that's just wrong. You should avoid that, is now being celebrated.
Gosh. Because
people have defined their own truth. Yeah. And so it can play itself out in a multitude of ways.
Well, unpack that for us just a little bit.
So rather than get into a deep discussion about it, I think the best way to talk about it is to give some examples. Jesus was a master storyteller. And he would give an example, and people are like, oh, so rather than me trying to convince someone, let me just give you a couple of examples. And we'll tease them out in the next couple as well, point 2 and 3. This idea of gender identity. 50 years ago.
It's a hot topic.
Yeah, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, anyone who believed you could transition from one sex to another was laughed at and considered dangerous. Today, this issue that was once universally condemned is now being celebrated as a new way of life.
Yeah.
So what was once universally condemned by the masses has now become, well, it's just your truth.
Yeah. It's the norm.
It's who are you to tell me what's right and wrong? And now we're taking the very foundation of everything that God created and undermining it because we want what we want and we want it our way. And so here's another one. Another hot topic. This is probably we're at episode 2 of the Good Life podcast, and we're going to get canceled here in this podcast.
Sounds fun.
This past year, Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Yeah.
The conversation around abortion. I'm not here to talk about when and how and all the little idiosyncrasies and nuances of abortion, but we always stand for life at Relevant Church and as a pastor and as a follower of Jesus. But I don't have time to get into all this and how we got here, but hear me. Up until 1973, when Roe v. Wade was passed and that whole conversation about abortion legal, abortion illegal, if we had read about a society prior to that, 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, in a culture or society, and what we have now done to unborn babies in the womb, souls created in the image of God, then we would have called it the greatest genocide in world history.
Without a doubt.
But we're living our truth. We're living what was universally condemned is now celebrated. So now it's beyond just being accepted. I heard somebody say this to me one time, and it changed my life. What is tolerated in one generation will be embraced by the next.
Wow, we're seeing that right before our eyes.
But here's the dilemma. We're beyond that. And then I added this just over the course of my lifetime. I've seen this. What is tolerated in one generation is embraced by the next, is then celebrated by the next.
Wow.
We're celebrating in the streets something that I understand it's an emotional issue in certain situations for people. I get that. I'm not trying here to debate this. But what was once universally condemned is now being celebrated.
Wow. So. That's so heavy, and there's so much truth in that. And in fact, in the last week, I came across a study, and it talked about the original Greek word you see in Scripture for the word baby, unborn baby, when you're talking about Jesus and Mary's womb, and then you talk about when they brought the children to Jesus. And it really brought some clarity to me. If you're listening, do some research on this, but it really brought some clarity to me on how God views children, born and unborn, and a very interesting study that I looked into. Yeah,
I think that's the key. Is if we want to be like God, like Christ, we got to view things the way God views them, and not that's again back to His truth.
His truth.
Here's the second one: what was universally celebrated is now condemned.
Wow.
So we had what was universally condemned is now celebrated. What is universally celebrated is now condemned. So here's how this plays itself out in the gender conversation. I'll give you one. I was raised, and I think most people in Western culture and even across the world were raised where, and you can go back all throughout time in history, men there was a certain kind of umbrella that manhood fell under. So here's a great example. Men would go out and kill it, bring it home, eat it. The wife would cook it. They would, there was just gender or
hunter-gatherer.
Yeah. And so not that always has to look that way in a home. That's not what I'm saying. And if you send me hate mail on that, then you just missed the whole point. You probably have your own truth. Here's the reality. What I'm saying is what was once seen as men taking care of their family, providing for their family, the gatekeeper of their home, leading, loving, laying down your life, once was celebrated, is now being condemned. I read a Twitter thread the other day and I was like, oh my gosh. The idea now that a man opening a door for a woman is seen as a man has to give permission for a woman to get in the car. I'm like, what are we smoking?
They say Silvery's dead, but I think Silvery just got choked. He got body slammed.
We're canceling things that have been universally celebrated.
Yeah.
Like, I still open the door for my wife to get in the car, especially when the kids are not around. If you think somehow that's me giving her permission to get in the car, then you don't live in my house.
Yeah.
Because she has...
That is crazy.
Listen, she has more of a voice when it comes to our home. She can speak her... Like, I lead our home, and ultimately, we make decisions together, but, like, her voice is so prominent in our home.
Yeah.
I trust... So, to somehow take and just... We're canceling things, what is universally celebrated. Honoring your spouse, honoring your wife, loving your family. I used to say it this way, the boy goes down so the girl goes free. Oh, no, don't say that.
Not anymore, you can't say that.
Listen, this is wild to me that my truth has led us down going, see, this is what you mean by what, we're calling it now toxic masculinity. Now listen, I understand there's an extreme version of that is a masculinity that is unhealthy.
Yeah.
But come on, we're now calling everything toxic masculinity.
Right.
And so why? Because we have so much confusion about gender. So you see where my truth leads down this whole thing just in that area. And so that's just one example.
If your ideologies don't match up with mine, then I'm just going to label it something extreme just to put all the spotlight back onto you.
Yeah, what it used to be was, this is my truth. Now it's, if you don't agree with my truth, I'm going to call you out. And if I can get enough people to buy into or we can have similar truths and develop our own theology and own cult, really, I can cancel you or do whatever. And it plays itself out in every area of life, from family to parenting to churches to politics to all these things.
And I think this has really spiked in the recent year, too, because of TikTok. And we've talked about the TikTok theology, and I see this with students all the time. They see a 60-second TikTok, and all of a sudden, that sounds good. And because it sounds good, it feels good. If it feels good, it has to be truth. And so there's so much bad theology and bad ideas that are just circling around on TikTok because of something that sounded good.
Yeah.
It made sense to me.
I love what John Mark Comer says about social media. He said, social media is a net negative to our culture and our society. And everything we talk about, probably, I shouldn't say everything, much of what we'll talk about in all of these episodes, you can point back to social media and say, well, that's propagating that lie. That's causing you to think that way. And I'm not saying social media inherently, it's amoral as a platform.
It's a tool. How's it being used?
Exactly. And I think this idea somehow that what was universally celebrated is now condemned, we have flipped the entire script. And this is why it's so dangerous for a society. Here's the third one. Those who refuse to celebrate are now condemned.
Gosh, that's so true.
This is cancel culture. So if you want to know where cancel culture came from, it came right here. Well, we used to say that was wrong. Now it's celebrate. Oh, sorry. Well, you now all of a sudden, we used to say that was right. Now we're saying that's wrong. And now anybody that disagrees with that, we're just going to cancel you, and we're going to, and so cancel culture is very, very real. And I'll get hate mail for this podcast, but hear me. I refuse, going back to our two examples earlier, to ever even entertain the idea that we should transition children from one sex to another, call it gender identity, call it what you want, just based on the way they feel at a certain age. But there are people in our culture who call themselves Christians who are in full support of this. And here's what I would say. They do not serve the same God that I serve. They don't understand the resurrected Christ who said, you must die to yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. They don't understand that. So I understand that's controversial. The fact that alone is controversial says a lot.
It's crazy.
it's not just controversial, it's asinine. I can't believe we're even here.
Yeah.
When it comes to the idea of innocent, unborn children, we are always going to stand on the side of life. I understand there are various arguments out there that would say, well, what about in this circumstance or this situation and all those things? Listen, we don't base entire cultures off of smaller segments of exceptions to things. Yeah. The vast majority of babies in our culture that are being aborted are not because someone was raped.
Exactly.
So let's not
We're giving a blanket answer for what should be probably case by case.
Let's not build an argument or a theology or a truth based on exceptions to a rule. Again, we can even have that theological conversation on a side note, but we're building entire political platforms and arguments and everything else based on that. And we will always err on the side of life. And here's the crazy part. When Roe v. Wade was overturned this year, pastors were like, uh-oh, if and when I speak out about this, people are going to leave my church. If and when I speak out about this, people are going to say things. I'm going to get canceled. Because what was universally condemned is now celebrated. What was universally celebrated is now condemned. And those who refuse to celebrate are now condemned. So that's how we got here.
Gosh, that's how we got here.
And what's the road back? I don't know. I'm just saying don't join the crowd.
Yeah. So you said a couple of times that you'll receive hate mail for this. So you have received hate mail. That's no surprise. Gosh, yeah. And there may be people or pastors listening to this, and they're in that situation. Like, if I speak out, I'm going to get canceled. I'm going to get hate mail. What would you say to those people?
I was just at a gathering in Texas, Dallas, Texas, with a bunch of large church pastors and even some church planters. And this very thing came up. A well-known pastor who has in that network was sharing with us and sharing with me afterwards when we had a conversation how he posted on social media in response to an attack upon one of his friends related to mega church pastors. At any rate, he and I had a conversation afterwards, and he made a statement that really resonated with me. He said, you know what? There are people who've lost their whole influence because they've responded to critics. And so then he and I talked afterwards, and I said, somebody told me this a long time ago, and it's something that I've operated by, is this: Jesus only responded to critics when that which is what they said was true. So they would accuse him, and the Bible says he remained silent. He remained silent. When they said, do you claim to be the Son of God? He said, that which you speak is true.
Yeah.
And so what I would say is, if you send me the hate mail, I'm not responding. Because these are truths of God's word, and you can send me the what about and what if and what about and all that kind of. Okay, again, we're not making full theologies off of a small segment of things that happen. The reality is we're looking for reasons to live our truth, and this is where it leads.
Wow.
So that's it. Maybe you'll never tune in again, and that's okay. But at the reality, our next episode, we're going to be talking about 3 lies that are perceived as truth, and I think it's going to be helpful. So listen, like and subscribe, share this episode. Don't respond to the negative comments if you do share this episode. But hey, thanks for joining us, and we'll continue the conversation next time. God bless you.